around 1380 there may have been as many as 2,000 students at Oxford and Cambridge. Most were at Oxford. Hello and welcome to Back to the Future. Today we do the Middle Ages, and I have to admit I don't know much about the Middle Ages except for King Arthur and Norwegian mythology. But I'm gonna try anyway. First I'm just gonna try to say what I remember from the Middle Ages. Not from the Middle Ages, I'm not from the Middle... You know what I mean. What I remember about the facts that I know from the Middle Ages. As far as I remember, in England, Latin replaced Old English as the main written language, and also Norman French. Beef, mutton and pork all derives from Norman French, while cows, sheep and pig derive from Old English, which is, you know, language changes. That's important for the Middle Ages. Language changes, and with language also literature changes, because before they've done all these parodies of all this epic heroic poetry and made fun of them because, you know, it was ridiculous. But in the Middle Ages they started making their own. Two of the biggest writers in the Middle Ages for me is Chaucer and Dante. Yet again, let's not talk about pronunciation here. Chaucer wrote in English and Dante wrote in Italian. Middle English also emerged from all this mass confusion about language. Epic poetry is also something that sort of came out of the Middle Ages. It didn't come out of the Middle Ages, of course. It came from the oral history of poetry for a long time ago, and it was really big during the ancient Greece. And as I said, they've done a lot of parodies on those up until now, when they started making their own. The book that I'm talking about today, The Divine Comedy by Dante, is a Western epic, which means it builds on old traditions. An epic poem is basically just a long narrative of telling the deeds of the narrator. It's often quite heroic. It takes elements from the national history and the mythology of wherever the author was from, and if there's no author, because it's oral history, it takes, you know, the history of where it was told usually. And these are not news stories. They don't like new stuff, do they? The Divine Comedy, written by Dante Alighieri. Dante Alighieri. It was written between 1308 and 1320, and Dante himself died in 1321, so you know. The book is an epic poem, so you know, poetry. It goes through 3 stages in this book. You have hell, you have the Purgatory, and you have heaven. It's also like in, you know, pretty, it's like Inferno, Purgatory, Paradiso. I don't know why I did that with my voice. I'm not mocking you Italians. I mock my Italian friend, but he can handle it. And the journey is basically through those 3 layers and towards God. First goes through Inferno, and, you know, walks past Satan. Then he walks through Purgatory and meets everyone who's in limbo, and then at the end he goes through Paradise and try to meet God. Numbers are super important in this book. I'm not even going to try to start on the number symbolic stuff in it, but there are 14,233 lines, and each place, as like Inferno, Purgatory and Paradise, has 33 cantos, except Inferno, which has 34, because it's like an introduction canto, which makes all the cantos add up to 100. Ooh. The travel is a first-person narrative, so it's basically Dante going on this journey. You have Virgil, the poet and writer from long time ago, who guides him through Inferno and Purgatory, and you have Beatrice guiding him through Paradise. Beatrice is like Dante's perfect woman, and she's basically made up of elements of his head. This is a woman he saw and met when he was a kid, but in his head she's bloody perfect. Let's take a walk through Inferno, shall we? No, we shall not. These are, you know, the sins sort of layered in circles around the deepest pit of hell with Satan. The 4 utmost sins are the sins of indulgence, because they are probably the least harmful but yet harmful. And then it just goes inwards through you meet the devil himself. Purgatory is basically just a limbo where people are being cleansed for their sins. It's a mountain with 7 terraces, one for each sin. And love is like the most important part of the Purgatory. Everything revolves around love. Love is very sinful in this book. If you're too obsessed, like Dante basically was Beatrice, it's a sin. And if you don't love enough, it's a sin. If you love too much, it's a sin. Everything goes back to the 7 deadly sins. But it's still Virgil sort of guiding Dante through this. I'm doing this now because they're going upwards. And they meet people, basically. And then they come to paradise, where Beatrice is. And he meets St. Peter. He meets Thomas and Aquinas. And in the end he sees a light. Beautiful light. And in all of these elements did he meet people who have been important for the history and in literature. He meets Achilles, who is amongst these sexual sinners, because he was obviously a sexual sinner. And he meets like Aristotle, and he meets Thomas Aquinas, St. Peter. He meets a lot of people who were important. Now, this episode, can I call this episode? I'm going to call this an episode. This episode is slightly, let's call it laid back and chill, mainly because I don't know that much about Middle Ages. It's just that The Divine Comedy is my favourite book from the Middle Ages, and it's one of the few books I've read from the Middle Ages. You have like Beowulf, the Canterbury Tales, La Mort d'Arthur, The Death of Arthur, as far as I can translate from French. But the point is, I've never had any classes about Middle Ages. I've never really learned anything about it, and all information you've learned today should not be repeated in an exam. Anyway, next week I will be going through my favourite parts of the Renaissance. I love the Renaissance. Get all giggly just thinking about it. This book, Life in the Middle Ages, I bought it yesterday at a market just because I realised I know nothing about Middle Ages. And it has such weird factual things, and it's like divided into categories. You don't have like literature, religion, no, you have the characters of the late Anglo-Saxon society, the changing countryside, the growth and declining of towns, which isn't does that go with the changing of the countryside? Dining table etiquette, I need that. Best bargain I've ever done. I will see you soon. I hope you have a lovely day, and that maybe you got an insight into my mind from this episode, because I don't think you learned very much. But what you should take away from this is that if you haven't read the Divine Comedy, you should read it.